remove the chalev at the bottom, only because we've been doing more and more aging of loins. And I think aging a loin and then pan frying it is kind of silly. I really do recommend these things for the grill. So I've been toying with the idea of just insisting that we're not going to salt them. It's going to be for the grill only. Take it or leave it. But we lose a lot of weight when I lose chalev on those things. And also, it is what it is. Aging it with the chalev on, you just lose less. So that comes down to the sellable yield. So at this point, I'm reminding you, your hips are broader than your legs. Even if you have muscular legs, the hip is going to be sticking out because it's a bone, and the heavier muscle on your leg is going to be developing this way. It's going to bulge out a little bit. But there's always going to be a dip. And that dip is pretty reflected over here because my knife has to go down at an angle. This is hard to see. You wouldn't notice it if I didn't tell you. But I'm starting out, the loin is wide over here, and it gets narrower towards the 13th rib. So if you'd like to understand and appreciate how I'm able to shave this thing and lose nothing, literally nothing, the answer is it's familiarity with anatomy and holding your knife at the right angle. Okay? That's the scene. Maybe 5 grams. That's not the most valuable meat there is. All this is chalev, it's all going to come out.
If you would have cut this way a little bit,
Mhm.
you think you would have left more chalev on?
Yes, but that's not my goal because we're not aging this. Yes,
Right.
if I were going to hang this up as a short loin, I
forgot
would
we're
have
not
definitely
aging.
gone, yes.
Yeah.
No, this is going out on, he wants the 8th, the 14th?
Yeah.
He wants to pick up on the 18th. That's Sunday.
4 days, yeah.
So this is chalev, again, no sense cutting it, but I'm just doing this to remove, to give you a better view of what we're going to be doing anyway before we do it. There. What you see right there is basically the flat tapered end of the tenderloin off to the side. It's thicker and meatier over here near the spine, but just so that it tapers out over here. This is just the membrane, which is actually, you can see now that it's soft and light, which will not be the case once it stays in refrigeration for a few days. Okay, what are we going to do, Mike? We're going to saw through this, we're going to leave it going on. 13th rib, do some cowboy thing?
Yeah, make him feel happy. You know? Because if not, then we just start out.
Yeah, that or we give it to him as a spare rib, as a spare rib.
Which is kind of pathetic, but then you give it to him.
That's what he gets. Since I don't create the animal, man, I just cut him up.
Alright, so if you give it to him as a cowboy, he's like, ooh, cowboy.
Right. He feels special and loved and thought about.
Yeah, masculine.
Okay, so that's all together. So cowboy, let's cover around it.
Yeah, cowboy.
I've shown you guys with the saw. Show you this one without. So I went down until the knife met the bone. It's definitely only one right here, but sometimes it's not the case. Now, I'm turning my knife parallel to the floor, and I'm basically shaving down the bone until the bone itself kind of peters out, and I'm left with just the cartilaginous edge of it. Remember, the 13th rib floats. 13th rib does not have external cartilaginous attachment that would later ossify and just become bone altogether. Okay, so all this is chalev. Clean and easy. The kidney, no great loss. No great loss. If he wants it, he wants it.
It's a partial.
Yeah, that's right. It's ripped.
And this here is Ashkenazi chalev?
Hang on, let me.
Yes.
What I'm cleaning up over here is just the seam, not for a compliance job, just again for the vista. You guys see what's going on over here. So, this is all still perfectly without crotch fat. This is Ashkenazi krum,
Okay.
followed by Ashkenazi chalev.
Goes there.
Okay. The crotch, the flank steak. And in our anatomy, only because all of our abdominal muscles pretty much do the same job, save for the bottom pair, which is much more associated with things like lifting your knees or tensioning the lower part of your abdomen so as to get your legs up or to stabilize the body when that's happening. The ones that are above the navel generally have more to do with stabilizing upper body movement. The abdominal muscles are very, very weak. They really don't serve much more of a purpose other than just helping to stabilize your body as you're up. They're very easy to strain, they're very easy to tear, and very easy to pull. In cattle, the flank steak really is only one of what's otherwise 4 abdominal muscles, rectus abdominis, the family. But the last one is the one that undergoes the most stress because they have very big bellies. Their stomachs usually lean left, especially when they're eating well. And so keeping the belly from swinging too much from side to side, the whole process of digesting grass or leaves is a very inefficient process. Did I already tell you that the detectives came yesterday?
What?
This particular muscle, the flank steak, the reason it's bigger, I mean, it's tasty as a steak because it's relatively, it's not very fatty, it's somewhat lean, but it's because of the shape of the belly. The belly is really narrower here and heavier over there, so the flank steak naturally has to pull so as to even out that whole spread. So even though they're on all fours and they're not bipedal, we don't have an exaggeratedly large muscle in that family, whereas they do. It's just a feature of ruminants, and the way their bellies work. It could be it's the same thing for the predatory, four-legged animals, but for sure when it comes to ruminants, that's why the flank steak, you can remember that the largest muscle always is the one closest to the crotch. Here you'll see a raw edge, or you'll see the bone that you had to saw off over here, or the bone you had to carve around to cut out, and that's how you know that it's the part that faces the ribs. It's the anterior side of the body, and this is just the belly as it was separated from the navel. And so the Ashkenazim, by the way, if you want a beef plate or the navel that they make pastrami out of sometimes, it's a little bit cheaper than brisket, they still have a membrane to peel off of there. Let nobody tell you they're not doing anything cooler because they have to clean out the hanger steak, they have to take that peritoneum off the diaphragm and the rest of the muscles that make up the bottom of the plate. Just try to figure out where this came off. It's going to be much more problematic. But the actual chalev where the rubber membrane was right over here. So the tri-tip doesn't have any chalev on it. Could potentially have a speck, and it'd be really hard pressed to make that case. But the rubber ran right over here.
Why wouldn't this over here be chalev?
It is.
Oh, I thought you said
All of this is chalev because this is on the
Right,
inside of
this
this. David, here's the rubber you're looking for. Okay?
right.
This is all chalev. It's along the spine and on the inside. This is
Right.
chalev casellium.
That's what I thought.
Okay? The fat behind it is totally
This side
fine.
that you were referring to.
Yeah, but you can see it recedes once you cut it. You can see what's on either side of that membrane. Now that membrane isn't necessarily a halachic parameter. Chances are you could go further. That membrane is already somewhat into the belly itself. It's behind the flank steak. So when this the peritoneal membrane comes off, the flank steak sits above the rubber, and for sure whatever's under the membrane and above the flank steak, for at least according to Sephardi tradition, is definitely not chalev. I'm saying this is already a chumrah. That if you only take the fat, you only harvest the fat from the outside of the rubbery part of it, for sure you're okay. Because the only halachic benchmark is the actual peritoneum itself. So, on goats and lambs, this tears easier from the sternum up. Obviously, we don't have that luxury over here, and this is pretty much useless. So, this just makes this process easier. And again, I will voice the regret. I think doing beef and goat and lamb in the same course was probably more than you guys were able to handle. That's how I learned, but
Ben said he left with 2 culottes and bison.
good. I seasoned 2 culottes for pastrami and smoked them at home. So I told him I'll make one for me. If you want, I'll throw one in there.
Okay.
I have probably exactly enough of that pastrami mix to do 1 more culat. I mean, I have like 5 of them in the bison. Just whip it out, we'll vacuum pack it, and I'll season it. And that way, because I'm hot smoking some red peppers, and I'll do these 3, and I'll have fresh Shabbat. It's there. It's 45 days old. Nobody's gonna pay for
I'm
it.
not going to stop you.
No, just so get it out, and then we'll get to it.
So I'm a bison, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so this, I'm pulling in the reverse direction I would normally pull on a goat or a lamb. And here it kind of needs to be open. Remember, these two aren't, they are contiguous, but you're not going to successfully tear one into the other. It helped along with the knife. So this is the Ashkenazi membrane, and that's like the Bnei Rhinos. So the Yekim did have a chumrah over there. And here, you got to be careful. It's not the seam in between. I don't want to pull the muscle off. What I want to get at is the actual membrane itself without that runs above the muscle. That's why it's easier to do in this direction. Okay. I did not expect or intend for anybody to learn this the first or second or third time around. I mean, practicing with me on Fridays, and I put that in the outline of the course. I went ahead and I reread it just to convince myself, you need to practice this. You understand, you're not going to learn this just from seeing it once or twice or doing it once or twice. What I want you to know is how to do it, and then come practice. And I can give you feedback on how you do it. It's just for me to teach you this 100 times is not going to solve the problem either. So, okay. That's the process. We'll clean this up in a minute. Not cleaning this up for compliance just yet. I just want you to see what I did. Okay? This is already not taken off anyway. Alright? Now, once the membrane has been removed, there basically is or should be little to no chelev left. The truth is, on cattle, especially this fatty, it's not that easy to say. Built sometimes you can say that. There's still going to be some fat that sticks out over the seams. What was under it, for sure not. Now, the peritoneum for sure covers all the muscle. So, save for a couple of these deposits where you can see the fat kind of runs over, that I'm going to remove, but this is the seam, right? Remember, the flank steak is by the crotch. This is the navel. That's the oblique. This is the seam that we're most concerned with, because that's where the chelev starts and kind of spills over. Now, all this for sure was under the peritoneum. Remember, so the membrane went up to here. So what I'm doing right now is purely aesthetic. It helps to identify things, it helps to keep things on the up and up. This is already silver skin down here, so I'm still being badats about this. Going Chazon Ish. Max texted me today that he met with this guy, Benny Friedman, who's apparently not the singer, Benny Friedman. And he asked him something about what he knows so far, and he showed him, he says to him, oh, so he does Ashkenaz. Max is like, what do you mean? He's like, he does everything mentioned by the Ramah. I was like, yes. The Ramah does not get into much glorious detail in the Torah. That's what the Shulchan Aruch mentions. So technically, yes. Ashkenaz, it's Ashkenaz. All right. Now, again, all this was covered. You want to get fancy?
Ashkenazi.
This he's the guy that told him he knows something about German Nikur, which again, I'd be impressed if there are any significant differences past what was already recorded in the 12th century, 13th century. But that's it. This would be one of those differences. This and the fact that they were lenient when it came to the stomachs. So they have a Chumra Nakula. Take your pick. All right? At this point, we are 1,000,000% compliant. I just want to make this crystal clear. We've been compliant already for about 5 minutes.
Crotch fat.
Okay, that's crotch fat. Spartan really aren't that concerned. Sure, yeah, mentions it, but it's not seem to have been the predominant practice.
For Ashkenazim, all this would have to come off, all this white
Well,
stuff.
for Ashkenazim who are insisting on Ashkenazi Nikur, then that's, and again, that's Bnei Rhinos, that is the Germans. So if you want to hold from their kula when it comes to the stomachs, you're going to have to hold from their chumrah when it comes to the, if you want.
In fact,
Crotch fat that I don't need, just throwing this out.
I'll trade the stomach fat for the
Right, so this would all come out. According to that tradition, this has chipui basar, so I don't have to cut in or between those muscles. No one says it has to be removed. But this would be what you'd have to be going after. You basically need to expose the muscle meat, and you have to reduce this. Now, the whole minhag of cutting down past silver skin or removing silver skin is not mentioned by the Ramah. It's way later. That's 19th century stuff. So what the Germans were talking about is basically, can you call the one membrane, a thin membrane, a krum?
No.
I krum dak, hove krum. So we don't consider the krum hakesalim that we remove the Breita that mentions it only mentions one krum. Why would we have to take off two? So it's the same thing because it's attached, is what they'll tell you. They're the same thing, they're attached, but it doesn't come off in one piece.
Right.
Okay, if you say so, but then if you do hold that way, then at least agree with us that there's no chelev under it. And they want to say, no, it's a thin krum, so it doesn't protect from chelev. It's part of a totally opposite understanding of that. I don't need protection from chelev. I need a convincing, compelling argument
That
that I
it
should
is chelev.
consider this chelev to begin with.
Right.
If this is chelev kasalim, it's because it comes off of the loins. And so the loin fat is over here. What's your obsession with the middle of the belly where there is no chelev? In fact, even the intestinal fat is mutter. Stomachs would be leaning over here, but it's not of that concern. If you were inclined to go rhinos all over this, you'd be doing this. Okay? Go down to silver skin. It doesn't say anywhere except for, again, 19th century Achron Achronim.
Oh, so this is not an ancient German tradition, this particular one?
The German tradition is to remove the fat in between the muscles. Yeah,
Okay.
there's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all striated,
Okay.
interrupted by fat. So the German tradition is to remove the shuman in between on
Okay.
a suspicion that it might be chelev, but it's not to scrape past the silver skin. That
Got it.
came
Okay.
way later.
Okay.
That's not to be confused. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so this guy is Ashkenazi. I don't think he himself knows any of these nuances or legitimately cares. I'll be honest with you, there isn't all that much redeeming qualities to this. I have been curious and haven't gotten around to throwing him into a cholent pot and seeing if the silver skin in between the muscles collapses and makes it just a pleasant gelatinous texture to it. The meat itself should be somewhat steaky, so I don't know if the meat would overcook before the silver skin would collapse. It would be like a pancetta,
Maybe a smoker.
porchetta kind of thing. If you roll this up and smoke it, and then it would, if it breaks down, it breaks down. That would be the goal. But for sure, this would come off according to the German tradition. Okay, because it was that gray area in between the kurumim. But this had some tension on it, so I'm not going to actually go all the way under. And again, this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm not doing this at this point for compliance. I'm waste of more on this.